Norfolk Celebrates. Often it is said that we in the United States, Virginia, and the Norfolk area are a community of immigrants. Significant and long-standing contributions have been made from Chinese, now United States citizens in our community. Today, we will celebrate some of those contributions because it remains the stated mission of the Norfolk Historical Society to serve as the catalyst for the collection, interpretation, presentation, and dissemination of Norfolk area history. We will begin by speaking with three neighbors who proudly represent their families and others who have made these significant and long-standing contributions. Welcome, Ms. Linda Ark, Ms. Jenny Wong, and Dr. George Wong.
Good afternoon. My name is George Wong. I am a family physician and the chairman of the board of the directors of the Chinese Community Association of Hampton Roads. We'd like to thank Warren Stewart and the Norfolk Historical Society for giving us the opportunity to tell the story of the Chinese experience in Hampton Roads. The immigration experience is not unique to any one ethnic group. Many diverse groups have found their future and their fortune in America. The Hampton Roads Chinese immigration experience will be told through the eyes of three local families. It symbolizes the dreams and the efforts of all past and future Chinese immigrants. It will be a daunting task. We truly hope this will intrigue others to look deeply into their own family history. It will be consequential and very meaningful. While preparing for this audiovisual history, all three of us researched our own particular family history. It was a wonderful and revealing experience. It has allowed us to become aware of the sacrifice and bravery of our ancestors. In the 1840s, the Chinese left the homes in southern China to seek a better life with the news of the discovery of gold in California. The Tuaishan region in the coastal Guangdong province of China provided the majority of immigrants, calculated to be 80% of the total immigration. In their search for the gold mountain in America, our ancestors came from one of the oldest countries to one of the youngest nations. They left their families and came to a country not knowing the language, with very few resources and no support system. Some came and indeed did find gold. Many came and succeeded in other vocations. Early on, besides building the Transcontinental Railroad, they introduced America to Chinese cuisine. They provided merchandising and laundry services for the local communities. They sent the bulk of their newly acquired wealth back to China to support extended families. Unfortunately, many of these families were kept apart for many years due to the Chinese Exclusion Act. Let's begin with the story of Linda Ark's family.
My name is Linda Ark. I serve on the board of directors for the Chinese Community Cultural Association of Hampton Roads. I am also a realtor with Howard Hanna Real Estate Services. My family has had a long history in Norfolk, Virginia. It began well over 120 years ago. In 1902, my grandfather, Li Hai Jin Ing, immigrated to the United States at the young age of 19. Grandfather joined other relatives who owned a Chinese restaurant in Norfolk, Virginia. Working hard in the restaurant, grandfather later became a partner. Eventually, grandfather returned to China to marry through an arranged marriage. My grandmother stayed in China to serve her in-laws, as that was the custom in those days. Around 1917, grandfather brought grandmother over to the United States. As he said, a wife needs to be with her husband. My grandparents were proud to be living in America, Maygaw, which means beautiful country. Wanting their children to be U.S. citizens, all 7 of the children were born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia, and graduated from Maury High School. Grandfather was quite the entrepreneur, and over the years he opened 3 restaurants. He opened Oriental on Granby Street, College Place in 1917. Later he opened Asia Restaurant on Botetourt, and their 3rd restaurant was on Brambleton Avenue. My grandparents lived a very full and adventuresome life. The Chinese church played an important role in the Chinese community. It was not only a place of worship and fellowship, but also the only place that the local Chinese could gather and socialize. The original Chinese church in 1920 was located on Bush Street. Later, it moved to the Freemason Baptist Church into the men's Bible study class. The Chinese Baptist Church played an integral part in the community, especially in my family, as that is where my parents met. My father, Ying Ma, graduated from MIT with a degree in aeronautical engineering. Dad worked on the first wind tunnel which was a joint project between MIT and Boston University. My father joined the Air Force to serve his country and was eventually stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Hampton. Because of his aeronautical engineering degree, he transitioned out of the Air Force and into civilian life. At that time, he worked for NACA, which later became known as NASA. Seeking Chinese fellowship, he would faithfully catch the ferry every Sunday to cross the Chesapeake Bay from Hampton to attend the Chinese church in Norfolk. My grandmother befriended the young man from Hampton and invited him to join her family for service and meals. My grandmother was hopeful that one of her granddaughters would catch the eye of the young, handsome Ying Ma. Eventually, my father and mother became a couple and married in June of 1946. Shortly after marrying, my parents moved to New York City, where my father continued his career as an aeronautical engineer. In July of 1947, I was born in New York. My parents decided they wanted to return to Norfolk to raise their family. They contacted a cousin who found a tavern for sale, which they purchased in 1947. They opened the Oriental Gardens restaurant located on Granby Street across from the Ocean View golf course. Eventually, Interstate 64 took over the property and my parents once again had to relocate. With the help of my uncle, who was a builder, my parents designed, built, and opened Ying's Chinese American Restaurant in 1957. It was located on North Military Highway by the Lansdale Traffic Circle. Being the entrepreneur that he was, my father invited Mayor Duckworth and all the city councilmen to attend the grand opening. Mayor Duckworth performed the ribbon cutting for Ying's restaurant. It was covered by the local newspaper, the Virginian Pilot. Ying soon became a favorite and a landmark in Norfolk. People would come to enjoy the fine, authentic Chinese cuisine. My parents owned and operated Ying's restaurant for over 25 years before they retired. The final restaurant of their lifetime was Mahi Ma's, named in honor of my parents, Ying and Nancy Ma. It was located at the Ramada Inn at 6th and Atlantic Avenue at the oceanfront in Virginia Beach. My parents raised 3 children in Norfolk, had a total of 7 grandchildren and 18 great-grandchildren. My brother and I still reside in the area, as well as one of my daughters and her family. My father, Ying Ma, passed away October of 2007, and my mother recently passed away in 2022. My parents lived a long and fruitful life. We are proud to have called the Hampton Roads our area for over 120 years.
Thank you, Lynn. That's a wonderful story. Let's turn next to Jenny Wong.
Hi, I'm Jenny Wong, born and raised in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. I'm an artist who works with watercolors, acrylics, and ceramics. In the past, I found work as a model, appearing in magazines, film, and television. I worked with several times with well-known photographer William S. McIntosh. I want to tell you a little bit about my family, especially my father, Park Foon Wong. He was born in Canton, China in 1911, and he immigrated to the United States when he was 16. He made the voyage to join his father at his laundry business in Norfolk, named Wong Hong Laundry on Butte Street in the 1940s. I remember my father told me a shirt was washed, pressed, and wrapped with brown paper and tied with a string was only 10 cents. I recently discovered, when researching my family's history, that my grandfather was actually born in America, in Truckee, California in 1886, and then went back to China to marry and have children. So my father learned about business through the laundromat and attended Ruffner Junior High School. I wish I had the chance to talk to him about the difficulties he had adjusting to American life. and learning English. Anyways, he adapted quickly and excelled in electronics. He later earned entrance to MIT to study electrical engineering. He wasn't able to finish there because of financial reasons, but eventually got a job as an electrician at the Naval Shipyard in Norfolk. He later left when a superior officer took credit for his work in a device he wanted to patent. He was in the Navy during the war, but out of frustration over his device, he left, going to Chicago in 1945 as the war ended to continue studies in television, radio, and electronics. Shortly after this is when my father decided to go into business for himself, but he would need some help. Unfortunately, his wife and 3 sons, Arthur, Edward, and David, were still in China. His marriage was arranged, only meeting my mother through a photograph and a string he got in the mail. The string represented her height, which he said was important to him, that the woman was not taller than he is, and he thought he was attractive, so he decided to travel back to China. They met each other once, and the second time they were married. He stayed long enough to have 3 sons before returning back to America. I can't imagine how hard it was for everyone involved to be separated for such a long time. It took my father almost 10 years to get them over here in 1950. A year later, I was born. They were critical in helping the business bloom. They all worked 6 days a week, with the boys heading back to the factory after school. It really was a family business. A little before that, in 1948, is when my father opened up the Norfolk Noodle Factory and Chinese-American Import Company located on Church Street in Norfolk. In 1958, the wholesale and retail business was moved to Reservoir Avenue off of Bremerton Avenue. There was an empty plot of land that needed to be cleared, where he built a single-story building conveniently next to a line on the Southern Railway. He intended the building to be a base for an import-export business with China, but had to look for new goods and services to produce when China turned communist in 1949. He did import from Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, providing a wide variety of Asian groceries. There were also things like freshwater chestnuts, bitter melon, bok choy, duck eggs, bean sprouts, fresh tofu, and ginger roots. Besides food items, there were also cooking utensils, from woks, steamers, to chopsticks. During this time, his store was the only place to get these things. But my father found the most success when he innovated ways to produce noodles. He knew the Chinese restaurants in the area needed a noodle supplier, and he needed to figure out a way to keep up with the growing demand. First, he upgraded the machines needed to mix, make, and cut the noodles. He even invented new ways to keep the starch from going everywhere, as well as the faster way to cut noodles. There was no noodle cutter, so he invented one and got it patented. Before that, his predecessor's factory made the noodles by hand on long tables, with the workers using bamboo poles to move the dough back and forth. These noodles supply about 90% of the Chinese restaurants in Norfolk and in the Hampton Roads area. He shipped them throughout Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia also. The factory produced 5 items: fried chow mein noodles, fresh egg and lo mein noodles, yakame noodles, which are dry noodles, as well as wrappers for egg rolls and wontons. Soy sauce was also made there. He owned and sold his business after 42 years, but I want to mention that during this time, he helped many Chinese immigrants to Norfolk, where he helped with translation. Many of the Chinese would work in the restaurants, but they couldn't read English. So my father translated the food and safety regulations into Chinese so they could meet their standards, where they were posted in all the kitchens. For more than 10 years, he was the official interpreter for the Chinese at Hampton Roads for the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service.
Well, Jenny, that was a great story. Thank you. Jenny, can you tell us why the Chinese say their last name first?
In traditional Chinese culture, the family is considered the most important unit of society, So they put the family name first and then the person's given name.
Thank you. Well, my family's journey to America began in 1904. My great-grandfather, Wong Jin Gan, was a farmer in southern China with a family of 10. It was decided that the number one son, Wong Saiwa, was to go to America to seek a better life. In 1904, at the age of 14, he left his family for California. His first job was as an orderly at an all-girls college in San Jose. It was there he acquired a notarized certificate stating that he was born in the United States and resided with his parents in San Jose. The true fact was that his parents never immigrated to America. His father passed away in China in 1916. This opportunity to receive this documentation was due to the loss of California state records of immigration during the Great San Francisco earthquake. Many Chinese immigrants took this opportunity to become sons of legal Chinese Americans. He was one of many paper sons. Wong Saiwa soon traveled to New York. He lived with an uncle and worked in a laundry. In 1907, he traveled to Norfolk, Virginia, where as a young adult, he learned his trade in several restaurants, laundries, and a noodle factory. During his time in America, he sent back money to support and educate his extended family. In 1911, he returned back to China and married Ing Shi. They had their first child, a daughter, Ruth. With my grandfather's planning another move to America, he adopted Herbert Ing. Herbert's biological father was a shoemaker and was unable to provide a good life for Herbert. Both families felt that the adoption was beneficial to all. The adoption of males to families with no sons was common in China. When the head of a household went to America to seek their fortune, it was desirable to have a male son in China. They were to support the family if they themselves could not return home for any reason. Families in China with no males were many times treated with less respect. Over the next 30 years, he was able to help bring his 5 younger brothers to Norfolk. The 6 brothers joined together and opened and operated many restaurants. Sam Lee Restaurant on Church Street, Charlie Wong Restaurant on Brambleton, Saiwa Restaurant and Great China Restaurant on Granby Street, Wong's Restaurant on West Charlotte Street, which is still standing, and Sai Gai Restaurant at Woods Corner. In the 1920s, Saiwa also worked in a noodle factory. He's one of the first Chinese community members to own a car. His Buick was used to transport product from the noodle factory. Saiwa had 13 children, 5 girls and 8 boys. My own father, Robert G.B.D. Wong, was the number 4 son of Wong Saiwa. He followed his father's footsteps and worked in the restaurant business after graduating from Maury High School. He owned and operated with my mom, Ann Ing Wong, Ho Toi Restaurant on Suez Point Road, Ho Ho Restaurant at Southern Shopping Center, and Ho Ho Restaurant at Gray Bridge. In order to provide for his wife and 3 little boys, he also drove a taxi for extra money. He operated a car paint and repair business and owned a pool hall. That's where I learned to play pool. All the while as my mother ran the small Ho Toi restaurant. My brothers Richard, John, and I later discovered that our parents had our future careers planned out for us. We all went to Lake Taylor High School and Virginia Tech. They decided one was to become an engineer, one was to be a dentist, and one a doctor, and we all unknowingly complied. It just happened. My parents, Robert and Ann Wong, were fortunate to have 6 grandchildren that found their own gold mountain in America with careers in law, medicine, dentistry, and computer technology. You know, Warren, doing our research, we have found that many of our ancestors served in the different branches of the armed forces for the United States. They wanted to ensure that the freedom and opportunity they enjoyed would be available to all who came later and who desired the same. Let me begin with my family or some of my relatives. Louis Wong, who was the number 1 son of Wong Saiwa, he was drafted into the Air Force and served in the European theater in World War II. He spoke fluent German and French and utilized his talent as a translator for the United States. He met his wife Susie and stepson Donnie while stationed in France. I remember as a child, Uncle Louis would be waxing poetic in French to his French wife and stepson, and I was amazed at the accent. My uncle Harry Wong Den was the number 2 son of Wong Sai-wah. He joined the U.S. Navy and fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II. He was stationed on the USS Strickland. He married Marjorie Wong and had 4 sons, Edward, Tommy, Larry, and Jeff. After the war, he operated the Hong Kong Tropical Fish House, the Riverview Laundromat, the Far East Noodle Factory and Cafe, which was near Booker T. Washington High, and finally Sai Gai Restaurant at Ward's Corner. Jimmy Wong, another uncle, served in the Army in the 1950s. He actually served in Germany with Elvis Presley. They were in the same platoon and they were good friends. After leaving the service, Jimmy started in home construction and operated the Jade Pagoda restaurant with his wife Virginia, mother-in-law Frances Moy, and his 2 children Kevin and Gia. In 1990, Jimmy was instrumental in directing the construction of the Chinese Community Center on Newtown Road. Next, Su To served in the Army in the spring of 1942 to the fall of 1945 with the 9th Infantry. He saw action in North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany. After leaving the service, he served as a master chef in multiple restaurants. He even worked with my dad at Ho Ho Restaurant at Southern Shopping Center. He had 2 children, Benny and Betty. Kiwi Wong served in the U.S. Army under the command of General Douglas MacArthur in the Philippines. He was also part of the occupational forces in Japan from 1945 to 1948. He owned and operated Kiwi's Garden at Hilltop Shopping Center. Kiwi was a past president of the Chinese community and helped raise funds for the construction of the community center. His son, Bon Wong, is a retired engineer and founding pastor of the Family Bible Church. William Hung Lee, who I think was my father's best friend, was the owner of Hoseki Restaurant on Granby Street. He was an Army Staff Sergeant from 1943 to 1946. While in the Army, he served in China, India, and Burma. He immigrated as a young boy to the U.S. from China and was raised in New York City, Chinatown by an uncle. He operated his restaurant with his wife Jenny and his 3 daughters, Irene, Doreen, and Corrine. Gene Sam Wong served in the U.S. Army during World War II. He spent the time in the service in Germany. After his discharge, he operated 2 restaurants, Toi San and Sun Hua, with his wife Sue. He had 2 daughters, Dottie and Kathleen, and 1 son, Terry. Fascinating thing to me when looking at it is I knew them all as just restaurant owners or people involved in laundromats, but they were wonderful people with deep backgrounds. And let's hear from Jenny Wong.
Paul H. Wong is my uncle. He served in the U.S. Army in the mid-1940s. After he was discharged, he owned and operated the Oriental Restaurant on Granby Street. His wife is Oy, and they have 3 children, Danny, Lisa, and Diane. Arthur Wong is my oldest brother. He attended Maury High and ODU. Then he served in the Army in the 1950s in Germany. He opened the Chinatown Imports on Granby Street with his wife Ida, and they have 2 children, Johnny and Alice. Edward Wong is my second oldest brother. He was in the Army in the early 60s. When he came back from his service, he worked at the Noodle Factory, and then he purchased the Ing's Restaurant at Janus Shopping Center and renamed it the Dragon House Restaurant. His wife is Ping, and they have 3 children, Richard, Judy, and Daisy.
Linda?
My father, Ying Ma, proudly served in the United States Air Force. He was a graduate of MIT with a degree in aeronautical engineering. He was also part of developing the first wind tunnel, which was a joint effort between MIT and Boston University. He was later stationed at Langley Air Force Base. He transitioned out of the service and into civilian life. My father, Ying Ma, worked at NACA and later became known as NASA, NASA. After leaving the service and a career in aeronautical engineering, he and his wife, Nancy, owned and operated several Chinese restaurants. They operated the landmark Ying's restaurant on Military Highway. Their last restaurant was Mahi Ma's at the oceanfront. He was past president of the Chinese Community Cultural Association and helped spearhead the efforts to build the Chinese Community Center on Newtown Road. He also served on the board of the Bank of Tidewater. My uncle, Ernest Ng, joined the Army, the U.S. Army in 1943. He was a graduate of Murray High School and Springfield College in Massachusetts. Uncle Ernie made a career of the Army. He moved up the ranks and later served as the attaché for General George Marshall. While in China, he met and married his wife, Anita Yen. My uncle had a very interesting career in the U.S. Army. From 1945 to 1948, Uncle Ernie was involved with the negotiations between the Chinese nationalists and the Chinese communists. He also served in the Korean conflict as an intelligence officer. Uncle Ernie retired from the U.S. Army as a colonel in the 1960s. He went on to open a chain of Burger Chef fast food restaurants in Northern Virginia, and he retired once more and moved to Atlanta. In October 26, 1999, during President Bill Clinton's term, Uncle Ernie was invited to the White House along with other Asian servicemen and women to be recognized for their outstanding military service. Concurrently, the Smithsonian Museum had an exhibit that they showed a documentary about the Chinese American veterans in World War II and their contributions to the United States. My Uncle Ernie, who was a retired colonel, was featured in that film. Not only men, but also women served to help the United States. My aunt, Betty Bo-Chun Ng, served with the American Red Cross in the 1940s. While serving in the American Blood Bank, she helped organize and gather 16 tons of supplies and equipment to be transported to the Bureau of Medical Aid to China. She was promoted to a lieutenant at the time. She met her husband, Bill Allen, when he was in the Army. They married in Washington, D.C., as it was against Virginia law to have an interracial marriage. After retiring from the Army as a colonel, Uncle Bill took a position at Texas A&M as an agricultural engineer. There they raised their family, 2 daughters, Elaine and Kay. Many Chinese Americans served during this time to do their part, and they were proud American citizens.
While I was attending college and medical school in the 1970s, there was a movement growing in the Chinese community in Hampton Roads. The movement was led by Nancy Ma, Linda's mom. This effort resulted in the Chinese community winning the first prize trophy for the best cultural exhibit on Heritage Day in the 1975 Neptune Festival. Jenny's brother was involved in the process of helping build the cultural booth. His name was Edward. And this led to the formation of the Chinese Community Cultural Club of Tidewater, which was later named the Chinese Community Association of Hampton Roads. The organization focused primarily about celebrating Chinese culture and helping newly arrived Chinese immigrants integrate into American society. This group met for the annual Chinese New Year and Thanksgiving celebration for many years at Roma Lodge off of Magic Hollow Boulevard. They also arranged for community picnics, dances, Easter egg hunts, Halloween parties. I think the most exciting example of our culture is the Lion Dance celebration at Chinese New Year, where the Chinese lion rings in the new year, banishing the old, bringing in new good luck. Our lion dancers totaled 163 over 45 years, so that's a rather select group. They raised over $140,000 in lucky money from the red envelopes which were given. We call those hung baos. The lion dancers were rewarded for each dance. We're very proud of our college scholarship program. The Chinese Community Association has supported the academic endeavors of our high school seniors and lion dancers every year. We have awarded over 70 scholarships to those students going to college since 1995. I remember one particular Thanksgiving, in fact, when we met at Roma Lodge. And we came for a wonderful Thanksgiving celebration, but we were locked out. There was no representative from the Roma Lodge organization to let us in. So here we had 200 Chinese people with turkey and rice, ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, we couldn't get in. My brother, the dentist, came to our rescue. His office was next door. He went to his office and got the name and number of a patient of his who he knew was a volunteer at Roma Lodge. Well, we got in. But can you imagine the scene on Thanksgiving Day? We enjoyed that day, but our experience that day taught us a lesson. It inspired our leaders in the community to begin fundraising for our own community center. During the 1980s and 1990s, enough funds were raised to purchase 5 separate parcels of land on Newtown Road. The total acreage was 2 acres, and the search for this real estate was guided by our own Linda Ark. Thank you, Linda. Since they had no office building initially, the Chinese community association leaders met at local restaurants, Great China and Ho Ho's in Chesapeake, Bamboo Hut, Kiwi's Garden, Golden China, Golden Dragon in Virginia Beach, Kim Ting and Ying's in Norfolk. There was lots of fellowship and good food, so we had some very good attendance at the meetings. The groundbreaking ceremony occurred on February 20, 1990, and the ribbon-cutting grand opening of the center took place 7 months later, September 16, 1990. It was attended by Mayor Myra Oberdorf, State Senator Clancy Holland, and the Ambassador of the Republic of China, Taiwan. This project was truly a community effort. It was paid in full with donations. No loans were taken from banks. Our construction team worked hand in hand with Hoy Construction. In conclusion, we 3 have enjoyed this experience and urge those who view this presentation to research your own family history. Our ancestors not only operated restaurants, shops, and laundries, they defended their country and laid the foundation for all of us to find our future in America. Thank you. Hey, listen, we finished our presentation, and I'd like to reflect on our experience and what you actually got out of it, the good, the bad. Linda, what did you think?
It was actually very fun and interesting to go back in history and gather all the little pieces of facts so that we could learn more about our family and how they came to the United States and what they did. So
Yeah.
it was interesting for me.
How about you, Jen?
Well, all this research has helped me because I'm actually writing a book about my family's history. So this convinced me that there are a lot of stories that I didn't even know about my family. So I'm really happy that we were able to do this.
Are you going to mention this in the book?
Maybe.
Maybe, thank you. I tell you, the thing that there are a couple things I have become to appreciate our ancestors, and I do regret that I did not pay them the proper respect when they were with us. That they all went through tremendous journeys to allow us to be here to talk about them, for our children to actually pursue their dreams in America. The number 7 brother, Wong Seidel, he was the youngest of the Wong boys that come over. And he wrote a book, and we refer to it as the Red Book. And the Red Book actually did a little history of all those brothers. And I remember when we were first talking about this, doing this audiovisual piece for the Historical Society, this is our chance to do our Red Book. Basically because the oral histories that we pass from family to family fades with time. And with that, maybe the accuracy is not the way it should be. But I think, however this turns out, it is our family history now that we can share. Warren, did you have any questions while you were listening to us?
I was in awe. I was in awe by the stories. Just fantastic stories. I also reflected on my familial background as I placed in the years and the times that you were talking about. My middle name is Allen, and so we're probably related somehow. In any event, I was in awe and I was in honor of all that, and I just received a chill, and that tells me that it is certainly an honorable thing that has happened here today. It's a special thing, and I'm very, very amazed by the stories. It's just fantastic.
Thank you, Warren. Thanks for the opportunity.
You know, what became very apparent was there were a few people in the beginning, and I'm just curious about roughly how many people initiated the whole contribution to our area, and then how many people would you guess it's exploded to since then? And I'm just curious about that explosion, and the contributions are magnificent, just fantastic.
Yeah, Warren, I'm not sure we can give you an actual number of how many
Sure.
Chinese are in the Hampton Roads area. The Chinese Community Association at its height had about 180 families as members. And that kind of would ebb and flow. It's interesting, most of the immigrants early on in the 1880s, and actually maybe the mid-1920s and 30s, were from Taiwan, southern part of China.
I remember you said that.
I think 80%. Now there's a change in that flow because there are more people coming from the northern aspects of China. The Fukienese are immigrating in, but that immigration process has slowed though.
I was curious about, in the beginning, we mentioned laundry and the explosion of restaurants and food services. I'm just curious, was there any particular reason why you think that succeeded so much? Or
I really think that that was a trade that the local Chinese knew. A lot of them were not college educated at that time. A few were, but most of them just knew
A
how
lot of
to
them did speak English. That's the restaurants. That's how they got into that.
so the learning of the language occurred because of the interaction with the customers.
Yeah.
I remember a little boy when he was about 4 years old that went to a restaurant in Ocean View and met a little girl who was about 4 years old. I remember that. What a wonderful experience, and what wonderful things have happened since then in 1950.
A long time ago.
Long
Yeah.
time ago.
That little boy and little girl were the two of us.
If you think about it, that question about why was there such a focus on, the restaurant business and laundries and things like that. If you think about it, all the waves of immigration, whether it's Irish, Italian, that's why you have Little Italy. People came over, the skills they had at the time, and our ancestors gave us the opportunity to what? Academically grow, pursue professional careers, and some stayed in the restaurant business. So I think it's not unique just to the Asian
Yes,
population.
sure.
I think all immigration, Mexican, Hispanic now,
Right.
and those children will be going to colleges and become professors and dentists, or stay in the restaurant business.
Once again, I must emphasize the awesomeness of the story and the honor it is for we in the Norfolk Historical Society to have the opportunity for you to tell the beginning part of the story of the contributions of Chinese Americans. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.